Hello, welcome to Sabbath School with Branch Davidians. I'm Ed, and I'm here with my wife, Mary.
Hello, we're excited you're joining us today.
Yes, thanks for listening. We present or expound on a principle or belief related to the SDA Sabbath School Quarterly each week. This quarter is entitled Three Cosmic Messages, of course referring to the three angels' messages of Revelation 14. This week's lesson is about the Sabbath. So we thought we'd take the opportunity to bring some clarity to two aspects of the Sabbath. First, what the word Sabbath means, and second, what it means to keep it holy.
Let's start with the word itself. Sabbath is actually just the English pronunciation of the Hebrew word Shabbat. In other words, the word Sabbath isn't actually a translation of the Hebrew word, it's just a way of pronouncing the Hebrew word. While it's cool to know that the Hebrews referred to the seventh day of the week as Sabbath or Shabbat, the downside is that this doesn't tell us what the word means. But to the ancient Israelites, the meaning of the word Shabbat was obvious because it was just a regular word in their language that they used frequently in contexts that didn't have anything to do with the seventh day.
As an example, think of God's promise after the flood in Genesis 8:22. It says, quote, "While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night will not cease." Genesis 8:22. The word cease here is the verb Shabbat in Hebrew, and there are many other examples that could be given where it's clear that Shabbat means to cease. When the seventh day is called the Shabbat, Shabbat there is a noun. So if it was translated rather than giving the Hebrew word, the Sabbath would literally be called the ceasing. What this means is that in the most basic sense, a day that is a Sabbath is a day of ceasing. And this should naturally raise the question, ceasing from what? We'll get into that in a minute. But first, let's consider the second aspect we wanted to talk about, and then we'll bring them both together.
As you may recall, the second aspect of the Sabbath we hope to bring to clarity is what it means to keep the Sabbath holy. Holiness is one of those ideas that people often have only vague notions of. Some people seem to have the impression that holy simply means related to God. Others have the idea that it means set apart. But really, when you look at how the Hebrew word translated holy was used, what it really means becomes more plain. The Hebrew word is kodesh, and it has several different forms that can be a noun, an adjective, or a verb. We'll read some passages where this word is used. When we come to the word kodesh, we'll just say kodesh rather than reading how it was translated, so that you can think about what it means by its context rather than how it was translated.
Let's start with God speaking to Moses on Mount Sinai. This is from Exodus 19. Quote, "Yahweh said to Moses, 'Go to the people and kodesh them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments and be ready for the third day. For on the third day Yahweh will come down in the sight of all the people on Mount Sinai. You shall set bounds to the people all around, saying, Be careful that you don't go up onto the mountain or touch its border. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death.' Yahweh said to Moses, 'Go down, warn the people, lest they break through to Yahweh to gaze, and many of them perish. Let the priests also, who come near to Yahweh, kodesh themselves, lest Yahweh break out on them.' Moses said to Yahweh, 'The people can't come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, Set bounds around the mountain and kodesh it.' Yahweh said to him, 'Go down, you shall bring Aaron up with you, but don't let the priests and the people break through to come up to Yahweh, lest he break out against them.'" Close quote. That's Exodus 19, 10 through 12, and 21 through 24. In this passage, people are told to kodesh three things: the people, the priests, and the mountain. Moses is to kodesh the people, the priests were to kodesh themselves, and the people were to kodesh the mountain. Whatever the kodeshers are said to do to the things they kodesh must be what kodesh means. And interestingly, there is one thing in common in all three cases.
Moses was told to set bounds to the people and to tell them not to touch the mountain at the pain of death. And when Yahweh told Moses to warn the people to not break through, he said to tell the priests also to kodesh themselves, And then later, it said that they weren't allowed to break through. So basically, the priests, like the people, were restricted from going up the mountain. And when it comes to the mountain being kadeshed, it actually uses an expression that repeats the same idea twice. It says, set bounds around the mountain and kadesh it. In all three cases, what it meant to kadesh something is to restrict it. The mountain was restricted. It was placed off limits, and the people and the priests were restricted from going up the mountain.
This lets us know that this word that is normally translated holy, kadesh, really means restricted. Here are a couple of other examples. Exodus 29:34 says, quote, if anything of the meat of the consecration or of the bread remains to the morning, then you shall burn the remainder with fire. It shall not be eaten, because it is kodesh, close quote. Or it shall not be eaten, because it is restricted. When you say, don't eat that because it's holy, it kind of leaves people wondering what it is about holiness that makes it so something can't be eaten. But when you say, don't eat that because it's restricted, that actually makes sense.
Here's another example that has to do with the anointing oil to be used in the sanctuary service. It's from Exodus 30:31-33. You shall speak to the children of Israel, saying, this shall be a kodesh anointing oil, or a restricted anointing oil, to me throughout your generations. It shall not be poured out on man's flesh, and do not make any like it, according to its composition. It is kodesh, restricted. It shall be kadesh, restricted to you. Whoever compounds any like it, or whoever puts any of it on a stranger, he shall be cut off from his people. Again, we notice how this passage repeatedly lays out restrictions and then says it is kadesh. The connection isn't obvious when you translate kadesh as holy, but when you understand that kadesh really means restricted, it makes perfect sense. It's saying, this is a restricted anointing oil. Don't pour it on someone and don't make any oil like it. It's restricted. Whoever makes oil like this will be cut off from his people. That makes sense, right? All right, so we have the two main pieces. The word Sabbath means ceasing, and the word usually translated holy really means restricted.
With these two things made clear, we can now read some passages about the Sabbath, and they should make a lot more sense to us now. We'll read from a translation that renders Shabbat as ceasing and Kodesh as restrict. Let's start with the fourth commandment in Exodus 20. Be remembering the day of the ceasing to restrict it. 6 days you'll serve, and you'll work all your employment. But the 7th day is a ceasing for Yahweh. You won't work any employment, you or your son or your daughter, your servant or your maid or your mammal or your traveler who is in your gates. As 6 days Yahweh worked the skies and the land, the sea and all that's in them, and he rested in the 7th day. On this surely Yahweh blessed the day of the ceasing and restricted it. Again, that was Exodus 20, 8-11.
So clearly, the Sabbath is the ceasing of working our employment. And it says it's a ceasing for Yahweh. In other words, we are restricted from doing our regular work and are to devote the 7th day to Yahweh. Let's read another passage, this time from Leviticus 23. And just hearing the same ideas another way will help to make it more and more clear. Quote, 6 days' employment will be worked, but the 7th day is a ceasing, a cessation, a meeting of restriction. Y'all won't do any employment. It's a ceasing for Yahweh in all y'all's residences. Again, that's Leviticus 23.
So again, the Sabbath is a day to cease the work of employment, and we are to do so for Yahweh. Let's read one more. This is from Exodus 31. Quote, 6 days' employment will be worked, but in the 7th day is a ceasing, a cessation restricted to Yahweh. Any worker of employment in the 7th day, he will be made to die. Yes, die. The sons of Israel will keep the ceasing to work the ceasing for their generations, a covenant of ineffable time between me and between the sons of Israel. It is a sign for ineffable time. As 6 days, Yahweh worked the skies and the land, but in the 7th day he ceased and was refreshed. Again, that was Exodus 31:15 through 17.
So for 6 days, employment is to be worked, but in the seventh day, the ceasing is to be worked. And notice it is a cessation restricted to Yahweh. In other words, rather than devoting our time and our energy to occupation, our employment, on the Sabbath we are to devote our time and our energy to Yahweh. Thus, Sabbath, the ceasing, serves as a sign between Yahweh and his people. One of the lessons to take away from this is that while the Sabbath is a time to rest from our regular work, there's nothing about the Sabbath command that says it's a time of inactivity. It's just when our actions are restricted to Yahweh.
Of course, Jesus understood this and did the work of his Father on the Sabbath. We read this in John 5. Jesus said to him, "Arise, take up your mat and walk." Immediately the man was made well and took up his mat and walked. Now that day was a Sabbath. So the Jews said to him who was cured, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry the mat." He answered them, "He who made me well said to me, 'Take up your mat and walk.'" The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. For this cause the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him because he did these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is still working, so I am working too." Again, that's John 5:8 through 11 and 15 through 17.
As you may have noticed, the idea that someone shouldn't pick up a mat on the Sabbath is nowhere stated in the Sabbath commandment. It's simply an addition to the law, and one that treats the Sabbath as though it was a day of inactivity. But Jesus knew that it was a day not of less work, but just a day in which our work is restricted to Yahweh. We are to cease working the works of our employment, that is, working for our livelihood, and instead work to further the plan of redemption.
Ellen White said something very much to this point as well, actually while commenting on this incident recorded in John 5. She said, "Heaven's work never ceases, and men should never rest from doing good. The Sabbath is not intended to be a period of useless inactivity. The law forbids secular labor on the day of rest of the Lord. The toil that gains a livelihood must cease. No labor for worldly pleasure or profit is lawful upon that day. But as God ceased his labor of creating and rested upon the Sabbath and blessed it, so man is to leave the occupation of his daily life and devote those sacred hours to healthful rest, to worship, and to holy deeds." That's from Desire of Ages, page 207.
Another interesting statement from Ellen White on this subject is in a description she gave of a particular Sabbath in Australia in 1898. Here's what she said. "The first Sabbath was a day of earnest activity. From Sunnyside and the school, 2 teams and a boat were sent to Dora Creek to bring to the meetings those who were not able to walk so far. The people had been invited to bring their lunch and come to the meeting prepared to spend the day, and they responded freely to the invitation. Some were much surprised that we would exert ourselves on the Sabbath to bring them to the meeting. They had been taught that Sunday keeping consisted largely in physical inactivity, and they thought that because we were zealous in the matter of Sabbath keeping, we would keep it according to the teachings of the Pharisees. We told our friends that in the matter of keeping the Sabbath, we studied the example and the teachings of Christ, whose Sabbaths were often spent in earnest effort to heal and to teach. That we believed that one of our sisters who was nursing a sick family was keeping the Sabbath as much as the one who was leading a division in the Sabbath school. That Christ could not please the Pharisees of his day, and that we did not expect that our efforts to serve the Lord would satisfy the Pharisees of our day." That's from Ellen White, Review and Herald, October 18th, 1898, paragraph 2.
So to summarize what we've learned, we've seen that the word Sabbath means ceasing, and the seventh day is a day of ceasing the work of our employment. We've also seen that the word usually translated holy really means restricted. So to keep the Sabbath holy means to restrict it, specifically to restrict it to Yahweh. Rather than Sabbath being a day of inactivity, it is a day of working for God as Christ did. It is a day of doing the work of the gospel. As the fourth commandment says, be remembering the day of the ceasing to restrict it. Thank you for staying with us till the end. We invite you to visit our website, www.bdsda.com, to learn more about who we are and, just as important, who we are not. Please join us each week as we will continue to offer new and interesting insights for your Sabbath School studies.
And if you want to keep up with our new studies as they're published, we recommend subscribing. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on plenty of other podcast apps. Links for subscribing are in the description.
God bless.
Many blessings.